He lived in an inner city area that was very well known for its drug-related shootings, but Arthur loved his flat. He'd lived there for 35 years. He'd lost his wife Madge, but they'd spent many, many happy years there. And what really mattered to Arthur was staying in his own flat. So Arthur and I got chatting and spent maybe 40 minutes, an hour. And what I really learned from Arthur was that what really mattered to him was having company. That he had people to talk to and share his stories with. He loved his food to be piping hot. He absolutely detested eating on his own. And he carried on talking about he wanted to be able to talk about his boxing. Very simple things, but things that really mattered to him, like always wearing his woolly bob hat, always knowing that his £10 was in his shirt pocket in case he ever needed it, he said. So he began to tell me about these things that really mattered to him, and I kind of captured some of that information about what great support looked like from Arthur's perspective. And he talked about he really didn't like it being dropped on him at the last minute if he had a hospital appointment. And he said that, you know, staff would sometimes have told him a week before, but if they didn't remind him every day, then he might forget. So we kind of began to capture all this sort of really rich information about the things that mattered to Arthur, what great support looked like to Arthur, and really spent a lovely hour just having a really good conversation, I think. So the other thing that really mattered to Arthur, of course, was his nephew Stephen, who went to see him every Tuesday evening, phoned him every night at 5 o'clock, and the highlight of Arthur's week was really going over to Stephen, his nephew's house on a Friday, and having tea there with Stephen and his wife Sally and the 3 children. It was something that he really looked forward to all week. So I sort of pulled all that information into a one-page profile and went back to Arthur with that and checked out whether I'd captured anything and made a few changes where I'd perhaps not got things quite right. So what Arthur and I talked about was, well, given that these were the things that really mattered to him if life was to be good, and this is how he wanted the people from the home care services to support him, we needed to actually think with the services that provided the service to him and with his family about whether those things were present or not. You know, what was actually the current reality for Arthur. So we arranged a meeting, Arthur and myself, Stephen and Sally, and some of the manager from the agency and some of the staff from the home care service. And we used the working not working tool. And that was really so effective because up front and early, going to working not working, sharing these things that really mattered to Arthur, what great support looked like, and asking, well, are these things present or not? So we were able to look at the things that were working well, and there were some things that were working well, you know, the contact with Stephen, staff having a key to the front door and the keypad that was on Arthur's flat door. So we kind of were able to celebrate those things that were working well. But what we found was, particularly from Arthur's perspective, there were a number of things not working well. So what we knew was Arthur loved his food to be piping hot. What wasn't working was the staff were preparing his food, but they didn't heat it until it was too hot because they didn't want Arthur to burn his mouth. They'd serve Arthur's meal, and the care plan said that you know, they needed to provide a hot meal, but there was actually nothing about a well-nourished person. So the meal was left, and the staff would have to leave. The other thing we knew was Arthur hated eating on his own, so there he was with a warm meal, not piping hot as he liked it, on his own, and consequently he would often throw much of the meal into the backyard. He lived in a ground floor flat. He was also left a sandwich at lunchtime, and he really did not like butties, so the sandwich would often go in the backyard as well. That resulted in the flat being infested with rats. That was one of the things that was contributing to this idea that Arthur needed to go in a home. The £10 note in Arthur's top pocket, the staff would, what wasn't working for Arthur was the staff were putting it somewhere safe, but then Arthur had forgot where it was, so he'd end up on his hands and knees searching for it, then couldn't get up, then by the time he got to the phone it might be gone midnight and he was having to ring Stephen to come over and help him get up. Again, another contributing factor to Arthur not being able to cope. Another incident that had happened was that one of the staff who'd gone to the early morning call had gone over to the bed and shook Arthur to wake him up. Arthur had hit her with his walking stick, thinking it was a burglar. Arthur, you know, is such a gentleman, but his negative reputation was in danger of escalating simply because the staff weren't stopping and thinking to actually call his name and make sure that he was awake before they approached him. So the other thing, Arthur's confusion, and Arthur was going out. Being confused was an issue, was not working for Arthur. But what wasn't working for Arthur's family and the staff team was Arthur going out in the night in such a dangerous area. So we kind of were able to look clearly at everybody's perspective around what was working and not working. And then we were able to really think together about what actions could we set to change those things that weren't working to working. Some of them were really easy. It was about making sure that all of the people that were actually supporting Arthur were clear about what was written on his one-page profile, but also realising that it was about, as we have great conversation with Arthur, we can capture new things that we're learning, that continual listening and learning. And the staff were great, they really embraced that. The other thing that we could think of, so that meant that people weren't constantly telling Arthur to take his bob hat off. People weren't moving the £10 out of his pocket. Another action was that Sally, Stephen's wife, was going to actually prepare Arthur's meals and freeze them so that the care staff that were going in could take a meal out of the freezer each evening. So at the sort of tea time call at 5 o'clock, the staff didn't have to prepare the meals, so they could heat it in the microwave, and they would then have time to sit with Arthur while he ate the meal. Vitally important, because that meant that you know, Arthur was actually eating his meal and enjoying it and enjoying company. The other action, of course, was to get the flat fumigated, basically, because things were in a bad way, and of course there was this problem with the rats. So, and resulting from those actions and things like, you know, we looked after the things that were important for Arthur as well within that wider heading of how best to support. We arranged for Arthur to have the pendant alarm. The care manager arranged for Arthur to have a sensor mat at his front door so that if he did go out in the night, that was linked up to the local mobile warden centre, so that would alert them that Arthur had gone out. So by simply listening really well and capturing that information, and then of course looking at working, not working, to really create our agenda for action to change those things that weren't working for Arthur to work in, made a huge difference. And as a result of that, 2 months later, I was sat chatting with Arthur, and he just looked at me and said, "Do you know, it's tons better now. They sit and have a cup of tea with me while I eat my meal, and I even get something warm at lunchtime. It's made a huge difference in my life." And I'll never forget the way, I don't know, he just looks so completely different, so relaxed and happy and well supported.